Hi, Maria.
Hi.
I wanted to clarify with you, how do you pronounce your dogs?
Dachshund.
Dachshund, okay.
Yeah. That's funny. You look nice.
Oh, really? Thank you. I like your background.
Oh, thank you. It's U of H Engineering. It's like the main entrance to the building. When they planted all these really pretty flowers and they were all blooming nicely.
So I did speak with Leonard, and Leonard said he was going to start, which I'm glad he did.
Oh, great.
Started the meeting for us.
And then he gave you controls, or you can.
Yes, he told me I can have administrative control.
Oh, great. Great. And I don't know, can you talk again?
I'm sorry.
I guess my it's weird. I have this these you can hear me, yes?
Yes, clearly.
Okay. Because I have this these earphones, but I guess they don't work. Because I think it's just kind of laptop. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Let me see if this one will work. It's very strange. They worked fine and then they just stopped working. But that's the way it is, I guess, sometimes. So this will be fun. You know, it's the art car this weekend, art car parade.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you normally go, Maria?
Oh, I have in the past. I haven't for a while. I went to, let me see if this will, okay. Can you hear me?
Ooh. Yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're still coming through the computer and not the headphones.
How do I get my picture from back there?
Down on the bottom, do you see a little video camera?
Yes.
If you click on the little triangle.
Okay.
Okay, and then it'll open choose virtual background.
Okay, I blur my background. Good.
You got it. Okay, well, I guess I can't use any earphones, so hopefully, I have one student here, but I told her I'd be in this webinar, so. Oops, okay, put that down. Make this bigger. I'm excited to hear what Carol has to say about future stuff.
I am too. Regional transportation.
Yeah. So I have my ASPA pin.
Let me see if I have one in my drawer. Try to keep one here.
Did Carol end up sending you any slides or no?
No, she did not.
Okay, so she's just probably.
And I hope I don't have to use Mr. Archer's slide because
Oh, do you know how to share screen?
I know how to share screen, but I had it on my. We are not allowed to use Google, and he sent it through Google.
Oh, shoot.
Let me see if I can forward it to my city email.
Oh, here comes Jim. Hi there.
Jim,
Good afternoon or good morning.
just a few minutes shy of afternoon, but it's great to have you. You look sharp.
Oh, well, whoops.
And you've got that cool map behind you.
Yes, we're making it easier for people who might have questions.
Great.
Right.
So Jim, you said you were able to share screen and show your work. I'm trying to bring up your slides, but I'm not able to, so I'm hoping it comes through soon.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
So,
So that would mean you need to release, whoever is the host needs to let me be able to share the screen.
Okay, let me see the one.
It's still saying that.
Can you try now and see if that helps?
No, still not letting me do that.
I forget, is it next to his name, Lynette? Let's see. If you see the 3 dots in his image and click.
No, I'm not seeing it. I see his name, but I'm not seeing the 3 dots.
Oh, well, is there a way to click on his name and either have the prompt be allow screen share or make him co-host so he can screen share?
I am not getting that option. Let me see.
Hello, everyone.
Hey,
Oh,
Dr.
Dr. Hall, so good to see you.
Okay, down at the bottom, Lynette, if you click on participants where it says
Yes.
participants 4,
Yes.
it'll pop up a list on the right-hand side.
Yes.
And I think if you go to his name and on the more box, hopefully there's a way to allow him to be co-host or to screen share.
It's not letting me do that. It's saying the options that I have when I click more is pin.
Okay, yeah. Okay, let me try by entering the host key and see if I can get more editing privileges. Okay, so it made me the host, and I'm gonna make Jim the co-host. And
Yes.
so now, Jim, you should be able to hopefully share your screen.
I am.
You have the ability now?
I do. Now I've got to find my
Excellent.
presentation here.
Okay.
It's
And
not-
Dr. Lewis, were you going to share a screen at all? Okay. Okay, very good. And Lynn, I will also make you co-host.
Hmm.
So you're co-host now also.
Thank you.
Okay, that was handy.
Thank you, Maria.
What happened there?
I can see your screen. Maybe you want to open, is your presentation in PowerPoint?
Yes, it is.
So down at the bottom, if you open PowerPoint.
Well, I've now lost everything, so I'm trying to
Uh-oh.
get back to where we were.
Uh.
Okay, so which one of these? Okay, that's better, but it's still not.
You could try stopping screen share and then opening your presentation and then
I can't even get the stuff at the bottom to come up.
oh,
So
for me, it's just like a hover. If you put your cursor towards the bottom of the screen.
yeah, I'm not sure what happened. I'm gonna
Mr.
go
Archer,
out.
are you seeing at the very top an option that says view options?
I have hide thumbnail video, show small active speaker, show thumbnail video. That's it. Okay.
Are you able to exit full screen?
I'm not sure what I did. I'm going to go out and come back in.
Okay, great. Hello, Dr. Thurman.
Hello, hello.
Hi there.
I didn't know we were supposed to be seen. Let me get my hair. Let me comb my hair first.
Yes, please. Get out that hair comb.
This is not working. I'm not sure what the problem is.
I can stop. No, let me see.
Oh, the fun of virtual meetings.
Can you see any of the Zoom like information or?
I can't. I was
Oh.
trying to get back out and see if I could come in, but it keeps giving me this smaller screen.
Oh,
Give me a second. Let's see what we can do here.
okay.
Okay. Nope, that's not doing it either. Okay. Um,
Okay, you stopped sharing your screen now.
Leonard, I'm glad you're able to join us.
Oh, he left. Jim left.
Maria, when you say he, are you talking about Mr. Archer or are you talking about Jim? I mean, Leonard.
Jim Archer, yeah.
Okay.
He'll be back. I'm going to mute the parts. Oops. Oh, I think I muted you, Dr. Lewis. Can you unmute yourself? Sorry about that. Thank you.
Mhm.
What we can do, Lynette, if he needs time to get his slides up, is I can do the introductions and he can be trying to set up his slides if he needs more time.
That would be great. So it's 11:59. Do you want me to start exactly at 12? It's 12 o'clock now.
Well, let's wait till he comes back. I think. I don't see him yet.
For those of you who are currently in the meeting, thank you for joining. We will be beginning shortly as soon as our presenter has rejoined the meeting.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Dr. Christoph.
Hi there.
Good afternoon.
We'll give him a few more minutes.
Ms. Howell, I just wanted to let you know that Dr. Majumdar is not going to be able to join because she's doing an exit exam. She wanted me to let you know.
I appreciate the
She's
update.
not.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christoph.
You're welcome.
Again, we'll be starting shortly. We're waiting for one of our presenters to rejoin the meeting due to technical issues.
Oh, here he comes. I see he's joining now.
Okay, he's logging in now.
Great.
Mr. Archer,
Yes.
are you all set?
I still can't get access. It now says the host disabled participant screen sharing. But we've had to make adjustments during COVID. We may just go with it and send out a PowerPoint later if that'll work.
Great, we're flexible. Maria, if you're all set, I can begin.
Yes, I just made you co-host again, Jim, so you should be able to share.
Greetings, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the Greater Houston chapter of the American Society for Public Administration Spring 2022 webinar event. My name is Lynette Howe, president of this dynamic team, and we are thrilled to have you join us today. ASPA is the largest and most prominent professional association for public administration with about 8,000 members, practitioners, professors, and students. ASPA's 4 core values are accountability and performance, professionalism, ethics, and social equity. Our session today, Metro Ridership and Regional Transportation, will be moderated by our President-elect Maria Modeska. A little bit about Maria. Maria is currently the Associate Director for Research Programs in the Engineering College at University of Houston. She received her MBA degree in 2014 from the University of Houston program and continues a decade-long career in academia with a focus on research administration and facilitating research and educational programs. As a native Houstonian, the growth of Houston is particularly of interest to her in the area of sustainability and resilience. Maria enjoys walking the Bayou Greenway trails and can often be seen being pulled down by the trail by her 2 dachshunds. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Maria as she introduces the panel and moderates today's session. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, President Howe, for that lovely introduction. I'm pleased to have Jim Archer and Dr. Carol Lewis with us today for our webinar, and I would like to read their bios and then start off our session. Jim Archer is the Director of Service Planning, Scheduling, and Evaluation in the Bus Operations Department at Metro. He grew up in the Midwest but got to Texas as fast as he could. Jim earned bachelor's and master's degree from Kenyon College and Rice University, respectively. He's in his 31st year working for Houston Metro. During that time, Jim has worked in multiple departments, has chaired Metro's Cost Control Initiatives Working Group and Strategic Parking Asset Utilization Task Force, and served on its Operating Ratio Task Force and Transit Fare Task Force. Prior to joining Metro, he worked 8 years for the Harris County Toll Road Authority and as its Public Information Officer and Manager of Revenue Collections. Jim has offered presentations at 10 American Public Transportation Association workshops and co-authored 4 presentations for 2 other APTA sessions. Jim has delivered multiple presentations to Metro Board committees, as well as the Metro Board of Directors on a wide array of topics. He worked with the planning, implementing, and modifying Houston Metro's successful new bus network. Prior to COVID-19, he also worked on service planning, service evaluation, and service monitoring for 3 hurricanes, 2 Super Bowls, 2 NCAA Final Fours, and a series of floods, ice storms, and other events which affected bus and rail service. He is completing his 110th week of bus service adjustments in response to COVID-19.
Get connected to the world today with the Houston Public
If
Library
someone can mute
MyLink
their
Library Card. Discover educational
there, or
information and
perhaps
fun
Lynette, you
entertainment
can do
such
that.
as streaming music and movies.
As a
ebooks, and
75-gallon blood donor,
Plus your
Jim
favorite books
enjoys
too,
reading and
so much
spending
more.
time with his
Get your
family.
MyLink
He and his
Library
wife
Card
Sherry
for
are
free.
empty
For
nesters,
more
as
details,
their
visit
son Daniel is in his first year of college
www.houstonlibrary.org
at Howard
or
Payne
call
University in
832
Brownwood, Texas. Thank you. Dr. Carol Abel Lewis is a professor in transportation studies and emeritus director of the Center for Transportation Training and Research at Texas Southern University. She is responsible for educating students in fundamentals of transportation and urban transportation issues, as well as conducting operational and policy-related transportation research. Current research focuses on automated vehicles for public transportation, purpose and need for vulnerable populations in megaregions, transit supportive development, bus operations on managed lanes, and best practices in public involvement. Since joining TSU, Dr. Lewis has conducted research for the US DOT, the Texas Department of Transportation, the Metropolitan Transit Authority of Harris County, metropolitan planning organizations such as Houston Galveston Area Council and North Central Texas Council of Governments, and with private transportation consultants. She served as principal investigator for the DHS National Transportation Security Center of Excellence. She accepted appointment to the Transportation Research Board's Executive Committee, chairs their Inclusion and Diversity Committee, and is a member of the Transit Research Advisory Committee, TRAC. She currently serves as chair of the Gulf Coast Rail District, nominated by the Houston Mayor and Harris County Judge and Commissioners Court. She's a member of the Houston Area Transportation Advocacy Group. Dr. Lewis is a member of the Houston Galveston Area Council's Transportation Policy Council and Transportation Advisory Committee. She is honored to have received the Rosa Parks Diversity Leadership Award from the Houston chapter of WTS and the TRB Sharon D. Banks Humanitarian Award. Her PhD is from the University of Houston and master's and bachelor's degree from the University of Iowa. Welcome to you both. We're so thankful to have you here. And if we could start with Mr. Archer on your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. So we're going to do an overview here of what's been happening at Metro as a result to our responses to a changing environment. As Maria mentioned, today is week number 110 of emergency responsiveness. To put that in perspective, Hurricane Rita back in 2005 was a 3-day emergency. Hurricane Ike in 2008 was a 4.5-day emergency. Hurricane Harvey was a 4.5-week emergency. COVID is a 110-week emergency continuing. Okay, let me see if I can. All right. So the world turned upside down for us on March the 11th, 2020, when the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo was shut down. Prior to that, Metro had been in a position where its ridership had been growing and our service levels had been growing. However, once the announcement was made to shut down the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, there was an immediate impact on downtown work environment and downtown ridership. Between February 2020 and Friday, March the 25th, Metro lost 90% of its ridership on downtown park and rides. These charts compare the ridership by time period, and the chart on the right, the majority of that ridership is actually ridership to the Texas Medical Center, which remained constant throughout COVID. So the majority of the loss obviously came from downtown. Now, an initial response that we had to have was to adjust social distancing. We remember that back in the early days of COVID, people weren't sure what exactly caused the transmission. And one of the concerns was that it was proximity. So with proximity, we ended up having to adjust the seating capacity on our various forms of transportation. So for example, on a Metro rail car, under normal circumstances, we would have allowed 150 people that would constitute a crowded car. With the initial COVID response for social distancing, that got cut down to 75 individuals. The same thing, an articulated bus could hold 62. It got cut to 26. What this did for us was then force us to have a large number of service changes to be able to put more service out on the street to accommodate the people who needed to go to jobs, the essential workers. At the same time, we were having to balance changes in our own workload, which we'll talk, and workforce. We'll talk about that as we move ahead. So as this slide shows, under a normal circumstance, we would have 1 bus and 3 rail service changes. Over a course of this period of time, we had 7 bus and 6 system-wide service changes. And we also ended up having multiple interim service changes. Normally, Metro would have 137 days between when we started the planning to when we implemented a service change. During fiscal year 2020, for all practical purposes, we had a month. So we lost 72% of our time for preparation. That would have been a challenge under any conditions, but one of the things that we faced in this situation was the fact that the majority of our schedulers had just recently retired. Metro's workforce consisted of numerous schedulers who had put in over 30 years with the authority. And within a 4-month time period in 2019, they all retired. So that whereas during Hurricane Harvey, we had staff other than the manager with 148 years of experience adjusting schedules, to start off with COVID, we had staff with 6 years experience. And I would note, you'll see with the one transit scheduler, she had been with us 1 week before we got sent home for the work from home. Now, Dr. Lewis will remember the first day of your job at Metro is orientation. The second day is showing you around. She didn't even have 3 full days of work before she was expected to have to assist with this process. And as you can see, when we did return to the office, we had to social distance, and we're still required to wear masks. I'm in an office, so I can take my mask off right now, but once the presentation's over and I have to go out into the hallway, I have to make sure that I've put my mask on. In addition to the high level, we wanted to kind of give you an idea of what this looked like as we made these service adjustments. Again, with the 90% reduction in the downtown park and ride ridership, there was no need to retain that service, and so we suspended it between March and May. Now, in late April, Central Houston, Inc. started doing a series of surveys, and the survey at the end of April assured us that more than 50% of the employers and employees would return to work in downtown 5 days a week following Memorial Day 2020. Those of you that work downtown know that we're still not back to 50%. We brought in a select portion of our park and ride routes, but we had to consolidate those by freeway corridor simply because of the limited ridership and the limited workforce availability. Likewise, between April and summer of 2020, we had to adjust the headways on our local bus routes. Now, when we redid our new bus network back in August of 2015, we classified all of our local bus routes into 3 categories. They're color-coded, red, blue, and green. Red is high frequency. That means we had a bus scheduled to run at least every 15 minutes. Blue is standard, so we have a bus scheduled to run every 30 minutes. Those 2 categories were designed to carry ridership along their service. Green, however, is a coverage service. Green was something that we provided in areas where there were issues of service equity. So when we made these adjustments, the only adjustments we made to green routes in April of 2020 were to remove the trips we normally would have offered for school simply because school had closed. So there were no in-person classes. Those trips could be removed. Otherwise, we left the green pretty much the same. We did have to make adjustments for red and blue. Now, as time went on, we also had to make adjustments for issues associated with both operators and equipment. Many of you have heard about the wonderful supply chain issue. So one of the things we ran into early on were a series of buses where we had a normal number of parts, but we needed an abnormal number. And so in some cases, we had buses that seemed to be in perfectly good shape that we could not send out because we could not fix them. We didn't have the parts. That then forced us as service planners to make some additional changes. So for example, the 50 Broadway and the 73 Belfort had been hooked. That means that the two ends were tied together previously. But the high ridership in terms of people that were staying on board was on the 73 Belfort. We didn't need that high service increase on the Broadway. So we separated the two to allow us to continue to offer high frequency on Belfort and a lower level of frequency on Broadway to better match both the ridership and our operator and bus availability. Same thing happened on the 56 Airline Montrose. We also implemented a Westheimer overlay. Now I'm speaking to a group who has to make recommendations and decisions and then evaluate them after the fact. So the change on the 56 Airline Montrose worked out great. It probably couldn't have worked out any better than we had planned. The implementation of the Westheimer overlay, however, is a case study in how not to do an overlay. So we will be writing that up and assessing it for the future. Didn't work at all. Now, it's not that the high level concept didn't, but our implementation just didn't cut the mustard. So we had to pull that out later on in time. And many of you are aware that during August of 2020, we implemented our first BRT line, the Metro Rapid Silver line over on Post Oak. In November 2020, we then faced a difficult situation because we had to adjust for the budget. During 2020, we had set aside monies for additional service that we simply didn't put in. And the monies that were set aside for that new service all went to some of the safety precautions that I'll talk about in a little bit. Well, we got to the end of 2020, we still need to do those safety precautions, but we didn't have those monies set aside. So we needed to look at making adjustments to our existing service. And so in some cases, what we did was we made reductions in service where there was redundancy. So for example, we have a 2 Bel Air that is a red or frequent service. The 2 Bel Air runs at least every 15 minutes. We had a 402 Bel Air Quick Line, which used to run every 15 minutes. They serve the same stops. What we did was to adjust the 402 to run less frequently because it was a redundant service. Then in August of last year, after we were getting more people returning to the office and we had more operators available, we separated the downtown park and ride routes to create 2 routes per freeway corridor where we could. The question that's raised regularly is, okay, what happened to travel time? Well, the one-way running time on these routes dropped significantly in April 2020 because we just simply had no traffic. Our on-time performance plummeted, not because we were late, but because we were early. It was impossible for bus operators to stay on schedule because the schedule is designed to have a certain amount of vehicles in place and to have stops to pick people up. When you're not picking people up and there's no vehicles on the road, you're going to be early. So what we did in the May-June service change is we said, look, we're not seeing these issues on weekdays. So we're going to adjust the running time on weekdays to be the Saturday running time. And then later on, we'll go back to weekday. That was the plan. The plan worked great until last summer when suddenly we start to see an increase in congestion. And it unfortunately coincided with our workforce challenges. In order to add running time, we have to be able to increase the number of operators. So I've just shown an example here of a route that we're looking at. So the 153 Harwin in February 2020 had a 79-minute one-way running time. That's the weekday. The Saturday was 60, so we adjusted it back to 60. So the current schedule still calls for 60 because we don't have the operators to increase it, but it is taking 62 minutes. Now, on a high level, you say, 2 more minutes, that's not a big deal, except that this bus runs for 18 hours at 30-minute headway, which means you're talking about 36 trips that are going to be late 2 minutes. Now you're talking about 72 minutes, and by the time you've got that last trip, it's late by over an hour. And now you have a problem because you're no longer reliable as you're trying to provide service. We did, as I mentioned, do a number of safety enhancements, and we've been implementing some of them, and we've continued them. Others we have adjusted along the way. Again, verbal announcements and visual announcements regarding the need for masks. We've had information on bus cards. We've installed hand sanitizers on all of our buses and rail cars. We've installed shields to protect the bus operators. And we've added additional cleaning of the bus interiors at the major transit centers. I'm located at the downtown transit center. If you were to go down to our bus area downstairs, you would see a group of people who every time a bus pulls in, they hop on and they spray down the seats, they spray down the panels that you push, the buttons that you push, to make sure that they are as sanitized as they can be. And that also happens at the very end of the rail lines. We did, as I mentioned, initially implement social distancing seating parameters. We have backed off of that. And for a while, we offered free fares to allow for rear door boarding to minimize operator-passenger interaction. Now, this is one of the more interesting things we've had to deal with in COVID, because normally when you talk about free fare, people get excited and they say, yay, this is a good thing. What we found was that our operators and our customers asked us to start charging a fare. And they did that because when you allow a free fare, you can't control who gets on the vehicle. And so we were having a large number of what is euphemistically referred to as non-destination riders who would get on and not get off the bus. And in many cases, this was causing a discomfort for our customers and for our operators. So again, we actually had the bizarre situation where we had our customers coming to us saying, please restore the fare. We want to pay so that way you can enforce destination riding. Question as well about, okay, how much does this cost? Well, you know, the dollars are still piling up because many of these processes are still ongoing. So there's an increased cost associated with the information, adding the hand sanitizers. There's both the capital cost of putting them in and then also the cost of keeping them filled, the operator shields, continually adjusting the service levels, the bus cleaning, extending the routes, and then the short-term loss of fare revenue. So what we're trying to do is to return ridership as best we can while adjusting and maintaining safety. When we first started, I spent an hour and 15 minutes every morning looking over the ridership loads on every single local bus trip. Once we decided that we could allow people to fill every seat on a local bus, now I spend my hour on Park and Ride, where we're looking at that. So it is a daily analysis of ridership trend. And I can assure you that somebody is looking at the ridership on every single trip because that's me. I'm doing that. We're looking at the trends. We're adjusting the assigned equipment because, again, in some cases, what we can do is offer a larger or smaller bus to be able to get something out there quicker. We're also evaluating the on-time performance as well as the service reliability. So here's where we are right now relative to where we were in February of 2020. So basically, our light rail has returned almost to normal with the exception on the red line of the trips between Burnett and the North Line Transit Center. That segment has very low ridership, and the ridership has not returned in the same way that it has for the rest of the red and the green and the purple. So as a result, we've not restored quite as much. In fact, it's somewhat ironic that 2 months ago, we had so many people riding. We've got college students from both TSU and the University of Houston who have enjoyed riding the Purple Line that we were actually back to 90% of the pre-COVID ridership on the Purple Line. It's dropped a little bit, but that's a wonderful situation to be in where we've got the ridership restored there. We've got somewhere around 75% of our local bus or motor bus service restored. That can be somewhat misleading because, as I mentioned at the beginning, we made very little adjustments to our coverage routes. And so what that means is the trips that we're missing are on our larger routes. We've not restored the 82 Westheimer back to a 6-minute headway. And so there's overcrowding on that bus route right now. And we know what we need to add there. And the same thing with commuter bus. Right now, we're only seeing about 33% of our ridership returning on commuter bus. And I'm going to talk a little more about that in a second. So here's a slide that shows you the idea of what happened with the ridership, an immediate plummet in April on local and slow but steady growth. So that we're now back to a point where every day it's somewhere between 66, 70% of our ridership has returned on the local system or its equivalent. On light rail, you can see we're far below on the red line. Green had an initial dip simply because we didn't have operators in April of 2020, so we ran that route with a bus bridge. And as you can see, purple actually came up quite close to where we were before. But here's our park and ride. Even though our park and ride has grown, it's not anywhere near where it was, again, primarily because of downtown. So here's a slide that gives you an idea of what we're looking at. We have been adding service. So on the left, you see the supply of seats versus the average daily boardings. Well, golly, you don't have any problems. Well, actually, part of what's happened with the return to the office is a new phenomenon. People are not returning 5 days a week. They're not returning 4 days a week. They're returning 1, 2, or 3 days a week. So what's happening is an average is not a meaningful statistic. What we're seeing is on a Tuesday, for example, the Tuesday this week, we had 11,000 boardings, 11,000 out of the 29 that we had originally back in February 2020. But as you can clearly see, our ridership on Friday is going to be around 4,000. So your average is very misleading. You've got a large number of people coming in just a couple days a week. And then on the fringe, Monday and Friday, we simply don't have that many people that are returning. We're offering more service. We're continuing to do the safety standards. We're letting people know that we have service. And what we're seeing is a return of ridership. Now, it's going to take a while for some individuals to return. We still have situations on the park and ride where people get on, and rather than allow someone to sit next to them, they put their computer, their purse, their bag in the seat next to them to try to achieve a form of social distancing. It's going to take a while. We also have people that have opted to drive in because they're only coming in 1 or 2 days a week. We don't look at this as a short-term fix. It's going to take us a while to get back to where we were, but we're committed to continuing to adjusting service and providing service as we have the workforce to do so and the buses to do so, and as the ridership returns. And with that, I thank you for the opportunity to provide this information, as well as thank you for riding Metro. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Lewis.
All right, thank you, Jim. Everyone, I'm sure you found that very interesting. I did. I hadn't seen all those details. So when I first was contacted under the title of what was going on with Metro, I said, well, I can't really do that. And they said, well, Jim Arch is going to be on. I'm like, yes, he can do that piece. So what I'd like to add is a little backdrop before we go into perhaps dialogue with you about what's going on in the region. So HVAC has been keeping data on COVID, vehicle miles traveled, and the like. So the one thing that I'll tell you that they did is they started in March of 2020 when COVID began. And they took that as the 100% point for looking at how many vehicle miles are traveled in our region. So that's the 8-county area. So when they talk about vehicle miles traveled, or what we call VMT, it's every vehicle that travels a mile, and that's multiplied. So that gives us our VMT. So they took March 2020 as a 100% mark. And then you'll all recall that everything was shut down, basically, right? No one was going anywhere. So the travel fell in just a really dramatic way to where it was 20%. By the time we were at the end of March, beginning of April, we were at 20% of the vehicle miles traveled from the beginning of March. When the stay-at-home order was lifted, it was April 30th of the same year that the total stay-at-home order was lifted. And at that point, the VMT began climbing. And so the statistics continued to increase until in November of 2021, we were 100% back to the same VMT that we had in March of 2020. Now, because I sit on the Transportation Policy Council and we look at all of these data and what they mean, I will tell you that we are still discovering what we're going to do with what we know. So Jim gave you a sort of a hint of it when he told you about what's going on with the park and ride service, people working a couple of days a week. So what we found with that VMT returning to that 100% level, and it will continue to increase, I'm going to tell you. So if you had any hopes of getting out of congestion in the Houston region, don't hold your breath. But the difficulty is that those trips that are back to that 100% level are not the same mix of commute trips as they were before. So, you know, Mr. Archer just told you that people are not working, you know, they're not coming into the office for 3 days a week, sort of, but they're not staying at the house either. And so what that's doing is it's giving the backdrop of how we plan and what we do to respond to what we see on the roadways in a different way. So historically, transportation planners did what we called a 4-step transportation model. And so that model at its core had added the home to work trip. So the historical thinking was that you look at how many people you have traveling from home to work, because they do that every day. It's generally your peak hour. It's generally the time the roadways are most congested. So that's when you plan for your commute trip. Well, lo and behold, here we are 70 years after that planning model was established, and it doesn't work anymore. So because now we have more trips that are non-home based than we do trips that are home based. I was at I'll tell you, I was at my church one Saturday, this is before COVID, and one of the people said, well, I'm about to leave because you never know what the traffic is going to be like on a Saturday. Being, you know, that's not what we had been used to. So HGAC in January approved a new type of model. It's called activity-based. And so what it does is it moves us away from that 4-step model we'd always done, which had the home to work trip at its core, and goes more into the kinds of activities that people are doing. You know, is it a recreation trip? Where is it from to? So it takes the emphasis off of that, which is going to be really helpful for us going forward. They just started. And I will tell you that doing these models takes about 18 months to 2 years. So they just started. It's going to be a while before the answer comes out, but it will inform us as to how we now should plan and what we should do differently, since the home to church work trip is no longer the trip at our core. The other thing I'll tell you that HGAC did is that they conducted a survey. And the survey was conducted December to January of 21 going into 22. And so they asked 237 employers what they were doing and what they were anticipating in their work environment. So the answers were that 66% of them, and again, you know, reach back to what you just saw in the park and ride graphic, 66% of them are allowing flex time. So that's basically, when you look at the 8-county region, 66% of those employers are allowing their employees to do something flexible. And so that means that what is confronting Metro with, you got park and ride riders for 2 days of the week and you don't 3 days, it's not going away. It's going to continue like that. Now, how do they respond? You know, it's really changing the paradigm. It's changing the box and how we've done our work in the past. Other things that they found, 16% are currently working at less than 50% of what they were doing before COVID started. So that means that essentially 16% of the businesses have actually shrunk since before COVID. They don't have, and here's the thing, they don't have formal telework programs. A lot of it is informal. You know, you just go in and talk to your manager and the manager lets you do what you want to. So HGAC does, and I support this, encourage the company to have a formalized telework plan, not just, you know, sort of happening by individual. And so that's kind of what's happening now. The other thing, though, which will be helpful for Metro, is that 83% of the companies did not plan to move or consolidate workforces. You know, you heard a lot when we were at home during COVID. Well, goodness, now these companies are going to realize they don't need all that office space. So they may start sharing offices, or they might move from a downtown location to a remote location because they don't have to, you know, they don't have to have all that in office space. Well, 83% of them said they're not making any changes in the next 2 years. So that, you know, that kind of put a pin in that it was going to totally change the way we move around. So those are just some background thoughts and information about what's happening in the backdrop as we're preparing to be post-COVID. And again, we don't actually know how our planet is going to proceed given what we know, but we're going to start with, first of all, a changing of the tools that we've been using that will allow us to investigate and better understand, you know, what's going on, better understand how do we manage all of the trips. The thing I will say that's also good news for Metro is that congestion is not going anywhere. And so trustfully, we'll get to the point where it will be an advantage for everyone to figure out how can I make my trip best. And sometimes that best trip might be on transit. You may or may not have heard that TxDOT has done a project, and it's called Connect Smart. And it's developed, you know, it's in the beta testing stages, so it will continue to improve and get better and stronger. But you take your device, you put in where you're going, and it allows you to select the best option for that trip, whether it be driving your own car, taking Metro, maybe even calling for some kind of Uber or Lyft service to take you to a close connection and connect in. Ultimately, it will also allow you to pay from that device. And so what the anticipation is that as a region, we will get to the point where that will be something that we can do, that we will all think very quickly about, okay, what I need to get from A to B, what's the best way I can make this trip right now? And sometimes it's not going to be in my car, but if it is in Metro, this device is going to help me to make that trip very quickly using Metro. The other thing that HJC is doing that it's going to take some time to mature, but there's a high capacity transit plan. So Metro is regrettably limited to Harris County, really just a portion of Harris County. And I think all of us would nod our heads yes, that we need solid public high capacity transit from outside of Harris into the county and vice versa. I've heard that there are Fort Bend employers who are looking for people that they want to be able to get from the urban out to Fort Bend. And so with the high capacity transit study that's beginning, hopefully we'll be able to see some movement and eventually have the kinds of regional transit that supplements Metro that many of us have experienced when we go to other cities. So that too, putting on my Gulf Coast Rail District hat, that's one of the things that Gulf Coast Rail District is working on. So the first two corridors that we have are sort of our low-hanging fruit. One is to extend the Metro BRT and this is so embryonic, but to extend the Metro BRT from where it's currently designed to end, I guess roughly West Will Crest, and extend it all the way into at least Fulshire and maybe to the couple of cities that are past Fulshire. And so we've talked to enough people that are in positions of authority to head nod and say, yes, it's a good idea, we like it, that we're proceeding with that. The other thing that's low-hanging fruit is we're looking at the 90A corridor, which is incredibly difficult to do anything about because there is no available right-of-way other than TxDOT's. And so we're going to have to try to figure out how to get us some high-capacity transit in that corridor, because we have to. We just have to figure out a way, and it's not going to be inexpensive. So Dr. Lewis will also tell you, if you have the opportunity, if someone asks you if you would like to pay more for public transit for our region, that you will say, yes, I would love to pay more for public transit for our region. So basically, overview, that's kind of what's going on in the backdrop, and gives you a little bit of information about what Metro is doing in relationship to what we need for the whole of the region. Both, they're concentrating on the transit trips, but there are others who are working very hard on all of our other trips. So that concludes my thoughts.
Thank you very much, both of you. And now we open the floor up to questions of our panelists. If you have a question, remember to unmute your microphone so we can hear you. You can also post a question in the chat.
I have a question
Yes.
for Dr. Lewis. How you doing?
Hi.
I'm fine. I was wondering, I know that the dynamics have changed as far as travel in the more present time, but I was wondering if like the deliveries that now that we see from Grubhub and DoorDash and all these things are creating more traffic in unusual times, because you even have travel in the middle of the night. So that was one thing I was wondering about. Those are deliveries that are new. I know we've been having Uber and Lyft and things like that, but even Uber Eats. So I was wondering, because people are ordering at all times of the hours.
So yes, and yes. There are data that show particularly how Uber and Lyft contribute to traffic congestion, because in order for them to get to you within 10 minutes, they are close and they are circling. So without question, the answer to what you're asking is absolutely. All of these ancillary delivery services and the convenience we have with Uber and Lyft are without a doubt adding to our congestion. The other thing, just to kind of talk about, okay, the future and will it make it better or worse, is automation. So I have this one colleague who talks about the fact that we're all into automation, and some of you may know that Metro actually paid for TSU to have an automated vehicle on our campus right before COVID came in, and Metro's still working on bringing it back in another form to connect to University of Houston and go to the Eastwood Transit Center. But I have one colleague who says, yes, we're going to get all this automated service, and then parents are going to be able to send that vehicle to take their child to piano lessons and to soccer practice. And so all of these sort of things that we're talking about, the convenience of the TNCs, the Ubers and Lyfts, and the automation that we're excited about, all of these things actually may add to our traffic problems as opposed to necessarily withdrawing and pulling from them. So yeah, I'll turn it back over. Are you?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I noticed another question in the chat too that Jim and I may volley together, and I see Mr. Thurman or Dr. Thurman, I'm not sure which.
Let's start with Dr. Thurman and then go to the chat question.
Well, my question is, Dr. Lewis, is about, I used to be city manager in Missouri City. And of course, we were in Metro, so we were paying our share of Metro. It always kind of aggravated me that Sugar Land, Stafford, and everybody else wasn't in Metro. They seem to be getting the same infrastructural and benefits. That's just a grief of mine. But but the Highway 98 corridor is a good idea if you could be implemented. And I'd understood that they were contemplating Rosenberg and Stafford and Sugar. They might be contemplating a rail district to pay for their share. So that's something worth pursuing for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say absolutely, absolutely. And you know, what you say is sort of correct in that, and Mr. Archer may want to say something here, that, you know, once you get to the West Belford Park and Ride, anybody who's coming from south of there can get on the vehicle. It's not prohibited whether you know your entity that where your resides pays the tax or not. So but I guess you could look at the other side. At least it takes a car off the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this group probably has more stories to tell that we're not sure when we write them up whether they'd put them in fiction or nonfiction. But to your point, I remember years ago we had a meeting with Fort Bend Commissioner James Patterson, and we were talking with him about the need to build a park and ride in Fort Bend County. And you've met him, so you understand. He wore a cowboy hat. He had the whole aura of a Texas farmer. And he took his cowboy hat off and he leaned forward and he said, "I don't have to pay a cent because all my people are going to use your lot and you need to expand it." Okay, that. I mean, we're actually in the process of trying to build a garage at West Belfort for exactly that reason. But I do know that now Fort Bend is looking at doing some construction of park and ride facilities because now the backup's gotten into their area.
Thank you. And that is an interesting question Leonard brought up in the chat that I see your comments, Jim. How is that? You know, Metro, where does Metro end and regional start around? Is that beyond the?
So the Metro service boundaries include the parts of Harris County that voted in 1979 to join Metro, the city of Houston, and 14 multi-cities. The parts of Harris County that are not included in Metro are primarily Precinct 2, but it is possible for entities outside of the Metro service area to pay Metro to operate service. So for example, right now we run service from Baytown Park and Ride, select trips, to the Maxi Road Park and Ride and into downtown. And to a comment earlier, when we first started and we did our customer survey, we had one person who filled it out by saying he lived in Beaumont. And he really didn't care what fare we charged. That hour of sleep between the Baytown Park and Ride and downtown was worth it for him. We also have a second service that we're running out of Conroe that is funded by HGAC. And again, this raises a really good point because from our Conroe Park and Ride to the north to our Bay Area Park and Ride on the south is the same distance as between Milwaukee and Chicago. And the distance between our Grand Parkway Park and Ride on the west and our Baytown Park and Ride on the east is the distance between San Antonio and Austin as the crow flies. That's what we're trying to cover. So when people say, well, you know, you just don't cover much of your service area, there's a certain amount to which you're right, because this area is just enormous that you're trying to deal with.
So Jim, I want you to give me those examples because I want to use them of that distance. That's fascinating. But the other thing I want to say is that the Gulf Coast Rail District is the only entity with the authority to do transit in the counties that it represents. So it's these counties: Montgomery, Waller, Fort Bend, and Galveston. So Brazoria is not in, nor is Chambers, but the other counties surrounding Harris are in the Gulf Coast. It's called the Gulf Coast Rail District, but we also have legislation that allows us to do bus rapid transit. So within our enabling legislation, we can do high capacity transit. We can't do really circulator, but there is a Fort Bend Transit that can do that kind of thing. So what our vision is that we will actually work to get the capital to construct whatever. And then we would have to work to get money we currently don't have to kick in for operation. But we think that the entities that are on our governing board are able to make those kinds of decisions. So just to give you an example of who sits on the Gulf Coast Rail District Board, Montgomery County Judge has a seat, Waller County Judge, Fort Bend has a person who sits on the seat. Harris County has 3 representatives. The City of Houston has 2 representatives, and Galveston County Judge has a representative. So that's the way it's structured. And so we work a lot with Harris County Toll Road Authority. We will work a lot with Fort Bend Authority. So it's that Gulf Coast Rail District Governing Board that would allow us to do corridor high capacity, sort of what we call the line haul transit.
Wow, that's amazing. And so vast, as y'all were alluding to. Do we have more questions?
I have a question.
Please.
I'll jump in if nobody's gonna say anything. Jim, you said that you need to get the buses to where they're, well, you were talking about how the demand had changed, where Fridays and Mondays were off. And I'd made a note here, I was thinking about, when you were talking about buses, getting buses to where they're needed, I'm thinking about 20 years ago when we figured out, looked in the police department, started looking at the data and trying to get the police to where they're needed quickly. So you didn't overstay, you didn't have too many police in areas of low crime. But the problem with the bus, from what I gather you said, it takes about maybe 5 months or something, or a long time lead time to change your routes. So you can't change quickly to get the buses to where they're needed on a daily basis.
Yeah, and you're on a certain level, you're correct. If we had had more operators, though, one of the things that we could have done, for example, our Grand Parkway Park and Ride showed overloads early on. And so what we did was we had a service supervisor out at that lot in the morning, and we put out a couple standby buses to try to determine when should we best put those in. And so we've actually added 4 morning and 4 afternoon trips because we have the operators to do that. The problem is now, as we're starting to see growth, we need it on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And your point's well taken, because actually this summer, the American Public Transit Association is going to have a transit operations planning and sustainability workshop. And one of the topics is going to be how to deal with this, because for years, schedulers have developed schedules that are weekday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, we've known for about 5 years that there's a drop on Friday. It's been about 10%, which is really not enough for people to argue about. But now we're not alone in seeing this phenomenon, and we're having to get the schedulers together to talk about how do we do this? Because again, our bus operators are unionized, and what they want are consecutive days off. And they really want consecutive days that are weekend. But our travel pattern is showing us we can do the consecutive days off, but it's probably going to be a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday, Monday. And that's probably better for us, but that does mean that you've got to change your schedule and the way you present it to the public. And I will say, we've had to learn to be very flexible thanks to the hurricanes. The hurricanes have been a positive for us in some ways I would never have imagined. You know, back with Harvey, one of our largest ridership routes was the 46 Gessner, but the bayou cutting through the middle was flooded and we couldn't get through the middle. So what we did was we actually created 2 separate bus routes, one that ran from the northern end down to Westview and then cut across, and one that ran from Westheimer to the southern end. So we knew that there was going to be about 20% of the ridership we couldn't serve, but by putting these in, we could serve about 80%. And I'll tell you, we got all kinds of internal fights. You can't get that information out. People are not going to understand. We put it out. It was only out for about 3 days, but the ridership was equal to 80% of what we would have had normally. People will go out and figure it out. Are you actually running service? If you are, they're smart. They'll figure out how to make that adjustment. It's us that have to make the willingness to say, it's okay not to run the same thing 5 days a week. And that's an adjustment. And Dr. Lewis will remember, I mean, when I first started, which was actually, we did a tag team. So her last day at Metro turned out to be the Friday before I joined. So my first memo was, hey, Dr. Lewis is leaving. It's like, okay, I had not met Dr. Lewis. In fact, we exchanged information for almost 20 years before we actually met. So, that's the way these things work. So and anyhow, it's one of those where when I first started, our service changes for the fall were always the week of Labor Day, because our management were older and school always started on the Tuesday after Labor Day. Well, by the time I started, it was starting in the middle of August. But we hadn't made that adjustment because the decision makers weren't aware of the change because they didn't have kids young enough to know about that. So, I mean, we're continually learning stuff that, okay, we need to make an adjustment here. During COVID, when we've got a shortage of operators, one of the things I've had to say to folks is, okay, if you don't have enough operators, here's where you don't necessarily have to run service. The week of Thanksgiving, the week of Christmas, the week of New Year's, and spring break week, we see a big plummet in ridership. So if you have to make an adjustment, we've got some data now that we can give you that will show you how best to make that adjustment. We never want to skip a trip, but if you don't have enough operators to run the service, you need to make a good decision based on the data as to where to minimize the impact to people. So your point is well taken, and we definitely have our work cut out for us moving forward.
Thank you so much. Oh, Dr. Aseche, quickly, we're about to finish. You had a question? You need to unmute your microphone, please.
So
I
while
wasn't
she,
here. I wasn't here at the beginning, because I had a class just got in. I'm wondering, is there any plan to expand? I don't know if you already addressed that. Any plan to expand the West Park Toll Road?
when you,
Because it's been congested right from the, right from,
Yeah.
from.
Yeah, so West Park Toll Road is operated by Harris County Toll Road Authority. So I don't know that Jim nor I are fully able to answer that question, but from the transportation policy perspective, because I do sit on the Regional Policy Council, I don't see any plan to expand any of the toll roads, and many of them have congested segments, but I don't think anybody's talking about that. Now, I will tell you, I'm not Hectra, right? So this is not Hectra. This is just Dr. Lewis telling you what she knows from years of being in transportation. When those facilities are designed, the anticipation is that when they become congested, one should raise the toll. That's the idea. Now, we tried that once in this region. The Fort Bend Toll Road, the Fort Bend Toll Authority tried to raise the toll once on that toll road out there by you, Dr. Thurman, out there, that one that goes into Fort Bend from the south side. It went over like a lead balloon and they backed off. So that's the answer to the, theoretically, a toll road is designed to increase the toll when it gets congested. Right quick, I put the link in the chat if anybody wants to look at that HGAC employer survey. I know that didn't make you happy, Dr. I can't see your name anymore, but it's Shelley. I know that didn't make you happy to know that by rights, the toll should be increased.
Thank you. And thank you for staying overtime. We really appreciate your participation, Dr. Lewis and Mr. Archer, in bringing so much information to us today. Hopefully the gems that came out of the hurricanes and floods will also see gems coming out of COVID and how we deal with transportation in our area going forward. Thank you all very much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank both of you.
Very welcome. Thank you.